Okay, good morning Year 10. So you'll do it now activity is to look at the two images in front of you, one of Wayne Rooney and the other of Jamie Vardy. And what I want you to do is I want you to spot the differences between the two images. So obviously both the images are of professional football players, but the images are different. So for example, the Wayne Rooney one is a mid shot with a black background, and the Jamie Vardy is a full body action shot with a coloured background. So make a list of the differences now and pause the video to do that. Okay, so here are some of the answers that you could have got. So both are footballers, yet they are different because Wayne Rooney is a close-up shot and Jamie Vardy is full body. Wayne Rooney has a red badge on his t-shirt. Jamie Vardy has a blue badge. Wayne Rooney's photograph is taken with a black background. Jamie Vardy's photograph is taken with a green-blue background. And you can see the supporting crowd there. Wayne Rooney looks happy, he's clearly celebrating, whereas Jamie Vardy looks focused and in the moment. Wayne Rooney has an Umbro badge. Jamie Vardy has a Nike badge. Obviously, there are more differences than that, but those are the key ones. So today's big picture is that we're going to be finding like-for-like connections between two texts and exploring these in detail. So far we've just been exploring how to make inferences about two texts. Today we're going to be exploring about making the best inferences and making the best connections between two texts. So we're going to be looking at similar sources, but we're going to be digging deeper to find those differences. So, for example, Wayne Rooney and Jamie Vardy are both footballers, but they react to their goal success differently. Okay, so we are going to be having a look at two texts here, The Hunger Games and Divergent. So if you were in class, you would be watching this on a video, but obviously you're not going to be today because you're watching this after the lesson. So what we've looked at is The Hunger Games and Divergent, and they're very similar in the sense that they are both about a dystopian society. In The Hunger Games, a group of children must fight to the death. The society is being punished for an uprising in the past, and in this clip we see Katniss volunteer to fight in the deadly Hunger Games. In Divergent, the society is split into 4 factions, so remember in the Hunger Games it's 13. As a teenager, they must choose which faction to be part of, so there's a choice that's happening there. In this clip, we see Tris select a different faction to the one she was born into. Okay, so although they are very similar, they've got different storylines. So if you were in class yesterday, we would have looked at the similarities. Both were female characters, both set in a dystopian society, both see this as kind of a spectator sport, so we'd have asked you to pick up those like-for-like points of connection. So the top tips for paper 2 Q2 are to read both extracts before you start the question, spend a couple of minutes mini planning, annotating the extracts, look for and identify like-for-like topics, themes, areas across both extracts. Example, people, setting, atmosphere, environment, object, action, focal point. Think about how these are different. So for example, today we're going to be looking at 2 extracts set in prison, so they're like for like, they're the same. However, within that, the people that you meet are different, the settings that you meet are different, the way they approach certain things are different. So it's the same topic, but there's differences within those. So you want to pick at least 2 quotes that you can compare across from each extract, and then you want to be thinking about what is the surface level inference, what am I seeing on the surface, and what's the deeper level, what can I be more perceptive about. Remember, there's no language analysis in this question. So I'm going to read these sources to you. So this is source A, and it's taken from a 19th century article by an anonymous prisoner describing his first day in Newgate jail. So that kind of contextual information is really important there. So it's 19th century, first day, Newgate jail. Strong and stony as the prison seems to be to passers-by, it looks much stonier and stronger to the men who enter it. The multiplicity of heavy walls, of iron gates and doorways, of huge locks, of bolts, spikes and bars of every imaginable shape and size, make of the place a very nightmare dungeon. I followed the gruff under-warden through some dark, chilly vaulted passages, now turning to the right, now to the left. We crossed a large hall, in the centre of which is a glass room for the use of prisoners when they are giving instructions to their lawyers. Still following, I was led into another large recess or chamber, on one side of which was a huge boiler with a furnace glowing under it, and on another side a large stone bath. On the third wall there were a couple of round towels on a roller, with a wooden bench beneath them. "Stop," cried the warden. "Take your clothes off." I hesitated. "Take your clothes off, do you hear?" My clothes were soon laid on a bench and a hot bath filled, and I went in. The officer had then his opportunity of taking up my garments one by one, searching their pockets and their linings, feeling them about and holding them against the light. My boots appeared to be especially suspicious. After he had put his hands into them, he thumped them violently on the stone floor, but there rolled nothing out. Having bathed, I was led down another passage, at the end of which were two gratings of iron bars, closely woven over with wire work, distant about 2 feet from each other. Unlocking both, he pushed me through and started me up 2 or 3 steps into a square courtyard, where there was a man walking to and fro very violently. After shouting, "One in!" he locked the 2 gratings and retreated rapidly in the direction of his dinner. Another warden, with a bunch of keys, came from a gloomy building that formed one side of the court. "Go up," he said to the pedestrian, who disappeared up a staircase instantly. "Where are you from?" the jailer asked me, "and what are you here for?" Being replied to on these points, he said shortly, "Come this way." He led up the dark stone staircase to a corridor with cells on one side, having iron doors to them, a foot or more in thickness. One of these cells was to be mine. Venturing as I went in to ask whether I might be allowed to walk in the yard when I pleased, he answered sharply, "You're just pleased to walk where and when you're told." He slammed the door, bolted it, locked and padlocked it. The cell was about 8 feet by 4, lighted by a loophole above eye level. It contained, besides an iron bedside with a straw mattress and 2 coarse rugs upon it, an uncomfortable stool, and a slanting reading desk fastened to the wall, on which were a Bible, a prayer book, and a hymn book. Alone for the first time since my apprehension, I stretched myself upon the bed, and with my hands over my eyes, endeavoured to collect my thoughts. I was soon aroused by the undoing of bolts and bars below, when a stentorian voice shouted from the yard, "All down!" I heard the cell doors being opened in the corridor, and in due turn mine was flung open, and the jailer looked in. The impression my body had left upon the rugs enraged him dreadfully. "What?" he cried, almost in a scream. "You've been lying on that 'ere bed, have you? You just let me catch in it again till night, that's all." "Oh," I said soothingly, "I didn't know. Now that I do know, I will not lie down again. If I find you on it again, I'll have you up before the governor or stop your supper. That's all. Go down." Okay, so that's the first source. Now, as I go on to read the second, I want to be thinking about the connections that we can make between the 2 texts. So this one is source B, and it's a modern piece. Okay, so it's the diary of a modern prisoner. Many people think that prison must be a terrifying place with lots of violent women locked behind bars. It isn't. My arrival at Holloway was smooth, humane, and expertly carried out, involving a quick fingerprinting on the Boss chair, body orifice security scanner, essentially a metal detector. So straight away, I've got points of comparison. It's also a first day. However, this is not a very scary place. It's a really humane entry into the prison. She doesn't have to strip off. There's a scanner instead, and it's completely different to the first source. There was no strip search, but there are rules. It was clear I'd brought in far too many clothes. I was allowed to just keep 12 tops, shirts, t-shirts and jumpers, and 6 bottoms, trousers, tracksuit bottoms and pyjamas. No toiletries were allowed, but I was given an emergency bag with prison issue, and I bought a welcome bag for $2.99, which would be subtracted from the cash I brought in with me. It contained a bottle of orange squash, biscuits, a bar of milk chocolate, deodorant, toothbrush and toothpaste, a comb and some tea bags and sugar. I had the choice of that or a smoker's bag, but I could take in my books, all 18 of them, and many given to me by my children, as well as my writing pads and a couple of pens. The welcome group and prison guards helped me and some other new inmates move our personal belongings, which had been transferred into transparent prison bags, to landing A3, the reception landing, which ended up being my home for the next few days. So we've now got this contrast with, it's described as the welcome groups, and the prison guards are very helpful. You know, they're moving the personal belongings. She refers to this as her home. It's a much different atmosphere. The lovely girl who had secured the food for me told me on the way that she had 2 more years to do, but enjoyed doing the reception work because it kept her out of the cell until quite late in the evening. That night was bitterly cold, and I soon realised that the windows in Holloway cells do little to keep the chill out. At first I was shown a cell with no curtains, and my helpers tried to fasten an orange blanket onto the railings without much success. Fortunately, there was another single cell available with curtains, this time near the guard's office, but the TV was not working, so there was another quick changeover. So we've got the difference in the cells as well. So although there was no curtains in the first one, they move her to a cell with curtains and a working television. So it's very much more about comfort in this prison. Then it was obvious that the one thin orange blanket on the bed was not enough. Soon the girls were at my cell door with extra blankets, even though that was apparently not normally allowed. Within a few minutes, they offered over 6. And then extra fruit and sandwiches that the girls must have had in their own cell started arriving, and shampoo for the shower and an extra toilet roll for the loo in my cell. I couldn't believe the kindness of them all. Many have commented about the solidarity in women's prison. Yes, there is bitching and some bullying, but there is also a lot more demonstrable empathy among the women prisoners than in a men's prison. They say that when that first lockup happens and you are left alone in your room, reality finally takes its toll. When they finally lie in bed, most new prisoners turn their heads towards the wall and start crying. I watched the coverage of my case on TV and fell promptly asleep. In the morning, a female guard from the different floor told me that there had been discussion for me to move to DO, the enhanced wing on the ground floor. I told her I was happy to stay where I was for the time being. Frankly, I'd already become friendly with the girls on my landing and had no wish to move. And I'd learned quite a lot of things from them. For example, how to put a pin on the latch door and pull it shut, or almost shut from the inside if someone had left the hatch open, and the lights on in the corridor through the night. They also cut out noise. Strangely, it gave you a feeling of being in control, which was welcome. At the same time, the girls showed me what to do if an overzealous guard had locked the latch door and there was no one there to unlock it. The back of the plastic spoon worked very well as a key. I'd heard stories of very long lockups endured by many prisoners was a relief. I went to see the lovely nurse and an instant friendship developed. So key word there, friendship with the staff. She filled in my personal medical history details, checked my blood pressure, which had gone down sharply after a couple of nights in Holloway, and suggested I should have a hepatitis B injection. I at first refused as I don't much like needles, but she explained it was my protection in case an inmate were to bite me. There are a lot of drug addicts in prison who may be carrying the virus from infected needles. After her explanation, I did not hesitate for an instant. My children came that Thursday afternoon for an hour. It was tightly supervised setting, but it was brilliant. We had to sit opposite each other after we kissed, and I reassured them that it was okay. There were strict rules about moving around, so we had to stay in our seats except when they got me a much-needed cup of coffee. I wasn't allowed to do it myself. It was the first I'd had since I went into Holloway, so it was quite a treat for a coffee addict. Okay, so if you'd been in class, we would have looked at the differences. Okay, the similarities, not the differences. I apologise. So things that you could have picked out: the physical appearance of the prison. So one being quite scary and cold and stony, and the other being more warm and welcoming. The differences between the prison staff. Again, scary, intimidating, and on the other side, friendly, even the word friendship being used later on. The treatment of the prison inmates, one's very humane, one it's very inhumane. The differences in the actual individual prison cells that you could compare. Okay. And then you would have done the exit ticket, but obviously you can't do that because you're watching this on YouTube, so we'll let you off with that one for today. Okay, speak to you again tomorrow, year 10.